Stepping off a train into a new city on your own offers absolute freedom. You set the itinerary, the pace, and the budget. But traveling solo removes the built-in safety net of a group. You are entirely responsible for your own situational awareness. When you start researching global destinations, you will inevitably see certain cities labeled as dangerous. That single word is far too broad to be useful for making an actual travel plan. To accurately assess a destination, we have to look at this decision matrix and categorize threats into 3 distinct typologies: systemic violence, environmental hazards, and opportunistic crime. Every threat requires a specific amount of cognitive load, the mental energy you spend constantly looking over your shoulder, checking maps, or securing your belongings. Choosing a city becomes a return on investment calculation. You have to ask if the physical and mental effort required to stay safe leaves enough bandwidth to actually enjoy the culture, food, and history you came for. Booking a smart solo trip requires knowing exactly what kind of threat you are walking into before you ever buy the ticket. We start with destinations where the threat level exceeds any amount of street smarts. In these cities, you face large-scale systemic violence caused by a breakdown in state control. For decades, Acapulco was a premier resort destination in Mexico. As seen in this vintage photograph, it built a massive industry on relaxed tourism. Today, the coastal city is located squarely in the middle of a prolonged cartel turf war that has consumed Guerrero State. The U.S. State Department lists the entire state as a strict do-not-travel zone. Independent armed groups frequently establish arbitrary roadblocks, and kidnapping remains a persistent threat to travelers. A similar erosion of authority is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. These modern government buildings represent an administration struggling with localized control. In early 2024, the government declared a public state of emergency in response to escalating gang violence and narcotics trafficking, officially warning tourists to avoid the capital center after dark. Then there is Caracas, Venezuela. This aerial view shows the striking geographic divide between the dense hillside barrios and the modern downtown infrastructure. Forbes assigned the Venezuelan capital a 100 out of 100 risk score on its safety index. The systemic crime here makes it nearly impossible to navigate safely as an outsider. For a solo traveler, the return on investment in these locations is entirely negative. When local authorities cannot maintain basic security, the logistics of personal survival consume the entire trip. Our second category moves away from human-driven violence to threats you breathe in. This is the environmental tax. New Delhi, India is a massive metropolis packed with world-class historical sites. But looking at this image of the India Gate, the architecture and people walking toward it are almost completely obscured by thick brown smog. This chart breaks down the severity. The World Health Organization sets a healthy air quality index baseline at a maximum of 50. In November 2024, New Delhi's air quality index shot past those limits, violently extending the scale to hit 1,700 in some districts. Breathing air at that concentration puts an immediate, severe strain on your respiratory system and carries documented long-term health risks. You cannot outsmart the air. Environmental hazards impose a physical tax that renders your travel budget and situational awareness completely useless. The third threat category is hyper-concentrated urban crime. This is where danger is strictly localized to specific blocks or times of day. Memphis, Tennessee pulls in tourists from around the world to see vibrant, neon-lit music clubs like the one shown here on Beale Street. However, looking at this statistical breakdown reveals a stark contrast. While the national average for violent crime sits at roughly 4 incidents per 1,000 people, Memphis registers at 24.37. Cities like this operate on segmented urban grids. Take St. Louis, Missouri. The Gateway Arch National Park is rated as one of the safest in the country, yet adjacent neighborhoods consistently struggle with high violent crime rates. Oakland, California faces a severe version of concentrated property crime. In 2023, a 38% surge in robberies forced numerous local businesses to close their doors. Police data revealed that roughly 1 in every 30 Oakland residents had a car stolen that year alone. This localized threat model applies internationally too. Marseille, France is famous for its gorgeous Mediterranean harbor and maritime history. Yet the city struggles with heavy gang-related violence tightly concentrated in specific northern districts, particularly the 13th through 16th arrondissements. London, England, and Pretoria, South Africa present similar logistical hurdles, where daytime tourist centers give way to a high probability of street theft at night. The specific tax in these urban centers is financial. You can mitigate the risk, but it requires a constant state of vigilance and paying a premium for secure transit rather than walking after dark. Map your risk tolerance on this chart, measuring vigilance against risk severity. Cities with concentrated crime, London, St. Louis, Memphis, land in the high vigilance, moderate risk quadrant. Systemic collapse destinations, Acapulco, Caracas, sit top right, extreme vigilance, critical risk. If you are a deal-seeking optimizer, those urban crime cities are only viable if you have factored secure private nighttime transport into your strict budget. If you are a bucket list traveler aiming for New Delhi, you must decide if seeing the monuments is worth the severe physical tax on your lungs. If you are booking your first solo trip, avoid this entire list. The constant cognitive load required to stay safe will drain the joy out of your exploration. A city labeled dangerous doesn't mean it's impossible to visit, but a successful solo trip requires doing the math on your own mental bandwidth before you leave home.